I'd like to hand over to Dr. Andi McKenzie, our Works on Paper curator, who will lead us in conversation with Wes this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Henry, for that very kind introduction and wonderful news that we have all eagerly been awaiting. I'm really excited to be here tonight with Wes and with Missy, who is hiding but is on the front row right here. So we're just want to point her out. As Henry mentioned, Wes was a stonemason by day, Missy a school teacher, and this kind of narrative of by night an art collector is something that I want to hit on pretty quickly because I think, and I know, just kind of cheating, I know that there's a great origin story for your collecting, how you began with your uncle and his guidance. So I'd love for you to be able to tell us a little bit more about that.
Wow. Yeah, I guess it's a fairly convoluted story. But yeah, I was so fortunate to have an in-family art advisor, my mother's oldest brother. His name was William L. May. My uncle was born in LaGrange, but he fled LaGrange as quick as he could, I think. But he was an art collector and an art patron. And so he's the one that infected me with this disease of collecting. He was very passionate about it. He had probably one of the largest private collections in the country of old master prints. He had over 1,200 pieces in his collection that went from Rembrandt to Picasso. So his collection could show 500 years of printmaking. So of all things, there's probably not that many people in the country knew as much about prints as my uncle did. So that's how we got started, probably back in 1975. I went to live with him in Colorado for a good long winter, and he had retired by that time from education. And anyway, he was telling me how wonderful it was for him and my aunt to have been in this art world and being collectors, and that I'd just gotten out of college in 1974, and so he was saying you should go out and find a job, make some money, and buy art. So of all things, I did find a job as a roughneck on an offshore drilling rig in the Persian Gulf. From 1976 to 78, I worked out there. And that's where you needed to be, I suppose, at that time for a young single person if you was thinking about making some money. And it's tax-free money at that, if you stay over there long enough. So I did. And my uncle starts sending me letters. He was a great writer and a great letter writer. They were always 10, 12 pages, single-space typed letters. And he's saying, basically, send me the money. I'm going to buy you some art. My uncle, who had all these connections in New York and around the country from his collecting days, became an art broker, and he was helping individuals and corporations put art collections together. He said his address was Eastern Airlines. He was going all over the place. And so I did. I started sending money, and after my 2 years in the Persian Gulf, I saw what he had bought. I came home, and I don't know, there's 15 or so pieces he had bought during that time. And he was teaching me at the same time as any time I had time to travel to, go to museums and look and read. He taught me how to build a library to keep yourself up to speed of what's going on in this contemporary art world. So that's how it all got started.
Thanks, Wes. I love that origin story because it continues, I think, from Wes's uncle, William L. May, who was an incredible advisor to him. There was a moment, though, in the 1980s, late 80s, where Wes and Missy had, amassed a good collection of Warhol pop artists. But as they looked at the demographics of their collection, it was 75 white guys.
Yeah.
Right. 2 women?
2 women and 2 black artists.
Right. Only 2 black artists. And so at that point, there was a pivot for you.
I know, that was interesting. Of all things, my uncle dies in 1987, and he was a very dominating force with Missy and me. He talked, you listen. He was a big talker, rather flamboyant, and a real, just your unforgettable character if you were to meet him. So I knew that day may come, and it was going to be difficult for Missy and me to stand on our own 2 feet because he did not leave me any contacts. He always told me, he said, you would be a lamb among wolves if you went to New York. And he was right. But no, I had a curator. We had a curator once. I think she was at the Cleveland Museum. We were talking to her. And we was telling her this, and that at that time in 1987, 88, if you were shopping in the mainstream gallery system, this is the kind of collection you were going to have. 75 white guys. We had a Helen Frankenthaler and a Louise Nevelson. We had a Jacob Lawrence and a Romare Bearden. And then the rest were all white males. And that's exactly the kind of collection you were going to have at that time. So we actually, as curator in Cleveland, said, wow, you and Missy really stepped back and looked at the collection and saw that it looked very, very funny. And she said, we never stopped. We never looked. We kept buying the same, artists. Cleveland Museum. Most museums did. But somehow Atlanta had their first Black Arts Festival in 1988, and there was a very powerful show that maybe we didn't realize at the time that was happening at the Atlanta College of Art during the festival. And it was called 5 Black Women, and it was like Camille Billups, Margot Humphrey, Howardina Pindell, Faith Ringgold, and Lois Mailou Jones. 5 women artists. And they were all here in Atlanta. And so Missy and I came up. This was in 1988, and the summer of 88. And so we met a couple of artists. We met Howardina Pindell, and we met Miss Jones, who's in Washington, D.C. We didn't meet Camille. She was a little too intimidating to go up to. With a big black hat and all this jewelry hanging off of her. And she had a mustache, God, and of course she had a swarm of people around her, so we didn't meet her that day. But we did get to Howardina, and we told her we were very interested in thinking about collecting African-American art. She said, if you're serious about doing that, you should call this number. This is called Camille Billups. She's the one you need to talk to. So within a couple of weeks, we went to New York, and I had Camille's number, and we called her on the phone, cold called her, and we talked. She's a big talker. And we talked for a little while on the phone, and finally she said, look, are you white or black? And I said, well, I'm white. She said, well, come on down here anyway. She lives on the corner of Broadway and Broome in Soho. So Missy and I rushed down to her loft, went up to the 7th floor. It's 4,000 square foot loft, full of art.
See it here on the right.
Oh, that's part of it.
It's part of the loft, and then...
And she was quite the collector. You can see the art there. And so we visited with her for several hours that Saturday afternoon. And when I met her, I thought, really and truly, I thought my uncle had been reincarnated into this wild and crazy black woman. She was as flamboyant and as brilliant and as visionary as my uncle was. So I had met her before I ever met her. I knew I had been around someone like her before. She did something that was so smart, I thought. She actually said, look, you don't know anything, right? So you got to read and get yourself educated. So Missy and I left that day with no art. We didn't buy any art, but we left with 2 handful of books that she gave us to read. So that was the beginning of some 30-year strong, close relationship with Camille Billups. So it was fantastic.
One of the things that we're really excited about is that the Billups Hatch archive is here at Emory, at the Rose Library. And so the Cochran collection was kind of driven by Camille. You've called her curator.
She's the curator of our collection.
It was important for her and for her husband, James Hatch, who you see her pictured with on the right. I remember, hearing that Camille wanted your collection here a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I think Randall Burkett, who's the former curator of African American Archives at the Rose Library, is here in the back. And one of my first meetings here at Emory was with Randall, and he talked about the Black print archive that they were building at Rose, the African American artist papers that they had begun to collect. And he asked me then if the Carlos might be a place for the works of art that still lived with the artists who created them, right? Would the Carlos potentially be a home for them? And it seemed logical to me. And at that point, I was young in my career, and so we had a couple meetings with past higher ups, and it wasn't the time, because we only collect works on paper, right? We don't collect the paintings and the sculptures, all the contemporary works of art that artists often still have in their possession. And so it wasn't the right time, wasn't the right fit. But then later on, this is how I found out about Wes and Missy Cochran. Randall kind of knew at that moment that, well, he didn't really think that was going to work. He just wanted to kind of put feelers out there. But then he told me about the Cochran collection. I found myself in LaGrange, Georgia. It's all works on paper. And so it was just one of those wonderful kind of moments where you see a passion and the drive. I think Camille and your uncle really kind of lent you that drive and that passion, that enthusiasm, both for collecting, but building something that should be shared. And I think that's one of the main tenets of how you collected over time, with the idea always of this work not languishing in storage. Bob Blackburn, who is a printmaker in New York, he said, thankfully, these works won't languish in acid-free boxes. And Wes and Missy's living room, they will be traveled, they will be seen, they will be appreciated. And they were traveled in large part across the South to rural institutions, and in large part that would not have had access to works by African-American artists. And that, I think, is one of the most important and significant contributions that this collection, continuing the legacy of that traveling and making sure that all of the work is accessible. Emory's going to do that too.
Good.
We've got images of Camille, Wes and Missy with Camille. Were there any particular artists, like when you guys went up there? I know that she introduced you to artists, to studios. How did that process work?
I know, this is like 1988. There is no gallery system for African-American artists in New York. There's nothing. There's no museum system. They had their own web, their own network. They supported each other. They all knew each other. They were all out there in the street together, I guess. And Camille knew everyone. So she just sat down and wrote down names and telephone numbers. This is before the cell phone and all the internet, really. And so we just started cold calling artists And, if you can drop Camille Billups' name, that helps to get things started because she was highly thought of. So that's sort of what Missy and I did. We did a lot of legwork and went to the artist studios and started buying the work. And then the word got around, there's this young white couple from Georgia up here buying art, and the check is not bouncing, So I was real conscious of that and not letting that happen. It was quite fantastic. And a lot of these artists we were meeting in New York, Jack Whitten, Joe Overstreet, a lot of these artists we became very, very good friends with over the years. It's amazing. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, most of them were from the South. They had migrated north, or their parents they were just removed from the Great Migration. So somehow it seemed like we had a connection in a way. And so I would try to put as much Southern charm as I could put out there. And it all seemed to work. Everyone was very receptive, and we were able to get these, I'm getting a 50% discount every time I buy a piece of art. You're buying it directly from the source. And when I'm in an artist studio, we never tried to negotiate. I thought that would be a little rude. So whatever they said, that's what we did. And anyway, that's sort of how it went.
I think that's a really important point to recognize, is that Wes and Missy bought directly from artists. There was a sort of bypassing of these big auction houses that take a percentage here and percentage there, and the galleries who take a percentage here and a percentage there and make so much money. While many times the artists who have are hoping to sign with a gallery but maybe have not yet, the money that they should have been getting was going to an auction house or a gallery. And so I think that that's a very important point to recognize when thinking about the relationships that you have with these artists. And I also want to make note, you're getting a discount. You're buying directly from the source. It's wonderful. And yet you're a stonemason by day, Missy, a school teacher. How did you finance it?
I know. Well, one thing, it does seem crazy. Now, before my uncle died, he trained me how to go into a bank and borrow money to buy art. And I had borrowed money when it was 18% back in the early 80s, right? And my uncle was always saying, look, whatever that little bit of interest is nothing compared to how these things are going to escalate, right? They're going to go up in price. Don't worry about paying that interest. So I pretty much did what he always told me to do. But so a lot of times that was in those early 80s. But as we get into what we're talking about now with the African American, we just, if we had to borrow money, we would. But it really wasn't that expensive. These things were going at lower prices at that time. Missy, thank goodness, would pay the telephone bill. And whatever monies I made, it went all to art. So we had this team going. If I remember, I think we probably were spending $20,000 a year back when we were really aggressively going at it, of buying art and putting this together that's here at Emory.
This is was it mainly over 2 years? That was after meeting Camille, there's like a period of really intense.
Yeah, and we met Camille in 1988. In 1991, we were opening our African American collection in downtown Atlanta with 75 pieces. We had went at it real aggressively and pretty strong, and had produced a catalog also to go with the collection. So, it moved along pretty quick, but it kept going for several more decades. It slowed down maybe a little bit, but we kept trying to make the collection stronger, deeper, more comprehensive, and so, we meet people like Bob Blackburn, who has his printmaking workshop in New York, he celebrated his 50th year of operation in 1998. It's the longest running print workshop in America. And Bob, we became very close friends with Bob. So he had invited a lot of African-American artists to his studio to do prints. So it was quite an archive for us to hook up with Bob. And we really enjoyed supporting Bob. He was living on the edge, trying to keep it together in New York. So that was always a pleasure. And then, and Bob, of course, was very close friends with this other artist here in Atlanta named Mildred Thompson. And Bob kept telling me I should call his friend Mildred. And I will tell this story. I guess I really made a blunder. I thought I had the books. I was reading everything I could read, and I'm not ever seeing Mildred Thompson's name in the books that I got. So I'm wondering why I need to call her. But Mildred was having a show here at Agnes Scott in 1988, 89, I think. So I heard about it. We read about it in the paper. So Missy and I rushed up here to see the show because I wanted to sort of see some of her work before I met her. And we came on that Sunday, and they had closed the show down one day early on Saturday, and it wasn't open on Sunday. So we missed it. So I went home, and I called Mildred, and Cole called her, and I said, I'm Wes Cochran from LaGrange, Georgia. The first thing she said was, where in the hell is LaGrange, Georgia? And she was about to hang up, and I think I may have dropped Bob Blackburn's name. But it was a very short conversation. She said, look, I'll call you back. And sure enough, within a few days, she called back. She told me later, she said, the grapevine in the art world is not very long. She checked us out. She was not going to let someone just walk in unannounced at her studio. So she said, you come up here, you come this Sunday. And we did, and visited with Mildred and her partner Donna at their beautiful house in Grant Park. And that was the beginning of another beautiful, some 15-year relationship with Mildred Thompson. And Mildred introduced us she knew a lot. She knew people from all over the world. And she introduced us to a lot of artists also.
And I'm showing you one of Wes and Missy's sort of home photos here. And this is Mildred playing the guitar. And this is their Mildred and Donna's Grant Park home. There's Wes on the couch, and you can see one of her amazing prints in the background. Mildred and Donna, her partner, played the blues together. So she was a woman of infinite talents. If I've had a conversation with you about art for more than 10 minutes, we have talked about Mildred Thompson. She was a force. She was inimitable. She was so prolific. She was printmaker, painter, sculptor, also played the blues. We Do Blues was the name of the band that Mildred played in with her partner, Donna. Mildred on the guitar and on vocals, very raspy vocals, and Donna on the drums. And you could hear them at Daddy D's Barbecue down the road from their Grant Park home. And the photographs that I'm showing you here and the settings that we're looking at were purposefully chosen because I feel like these three artists, Camille, Mildred, and Bob Blackburn, were so formative for you. And the hubs sort of this intellectual and creative engagement, Mildred's Grant Park living room, the printmaking workshop in New York of Bob Blackburn, and then Camille's Loft in Soho, where she and James Hatch hosted salons, and so artists were coming in and out. And it must have been an incredible learning experience, I think, in all three cases. So I got these photographs that you're seeing here. Wes and Missy brought a photo album today, and I had asked if they had just a few photos that they could share. And about 10 minutes before I was supposed to have this PowerPoint done, I'm presented with this incredible album of hundreds of photographs that really should also be documented alongside these works of art. I mean, I would like to go back now and have a look at them. I mean, they need to be sat with and pored over and appreciated. I want to turn back to Bob Blackburn quickly, because Bob wrote a really incredible sort of forward for, I think, that first show of works by African-American artists. Mm-hmm. And there's a beautiful catalog that went along with that. So I'm going to read how he describes this collection. It is as true then as it is now. And so this is his forward for the exhibition and the catalog. This is not an ordinary collection. It is duplicated nowhere. Still to this day, duplicated nowhere. Nowhere close. This exhibition grew out of the love and imaginative dream of Wes and Missy Cochran of LaGrange, Georgia. They wanted to create a collection of prints reflective of African American artists, which could primarily be displayed as an artistic, educational, and cultural presentation. The focus of these presentations is toward the Deep South and institutions that rarely see this kind of work. The Cochrans collection is not an erudite statement about the African American experience, but it reveals the personal vision and joy of one couple who bring their enthusiasm, love, and deep feelings about African American art. And this is at this point when most of the works were purchased in this sort of 2-year period. And this is what I mentioned earlier. Happily, these works are not destined for nice acid-free boxes in Wes's living room, but are here on display along with this beautiful catalog to be appreciated by all of us. These artists will welcome the development of a broader audience for their work. And if we could touch back on how you and Missy shared this work, because it is one thing to say that you have and to know that you did, but traveling, I mean, they worked as like a 2-person museum for decades because this work did not sit still. It never languished. Could you talk a little bit about that process and that experience and the travel aspect of this and getting this work out there?
I know that, Andy, that was probably one of our biggest rewards, is being able to share the collection and take it around. So we got the art. I had a great framing guy in LaGrange who got weary of me coming. He started trying to teach me how to frame, which I know enough to be dangerous probably, but trying to save money. So anyway, we did a lot of the framing or putting things together. I don't cut mats or anything. But anyway, we had that. And then we built wooden crates to house the collection, right? So when you travel it, it's got protection. There's a lot of lumber around these pieces. So we built the crates for the art. And then it was amazing. It became very popular, this show. This collection we're talking about that we first had with 75 pieces that opened in Atlanta has been in over 65 museums now around the country. And I was the truck driver and delivery boy also in those early days. I don't do that anymore, but just trying to save money. Transportation's expensive for these smaller museums. We really enjoyed going to smaller venues. So that's what we did or have done for a long time. We actually have generated 4 different collections that we toured around the country. But the African American is very special, and we've shown it in a lot of different places that I always wanted. Hopefully they were in a secure place. Some of this might have been in community centers and things that were climate controlled, but not the greatest places. We once showed this African American collection. This guy booked the show in Danville, Virginia, which is a historical museum. And it was the last cabinet meeting for the Confederate Army. As they were fleeing Richmond, I think they stopped in Danville. So they had our African American collection. I thought that was fantastic. So that's what we really enjoyed doing.
And what Missy won't tell you is that she acted as basically the registrar, an entire department, an entire team of people cataloging all of these pieces. I mean, there's over, what is the number now? Over 500 in this collection. In this collection alone, right. Having worked in a museum for a long time, that was really painstaking effort and really nothing short of miraculous that not only these works were brought together, but they have been shared in this way. And accessibility, I think that was very close to I think your core kind of philosophy of collecting, making sure that it didn't ever languish. And I think too, it shows that, so we're looking at a work by Bob Blackburn, and this on the left is a work by Ron Adams. This is an image of Blackburn in his Chelsea workshop, the printmaking workshop. Primarily a lithographer, Blackburn printed for everybody. He was the printmaker's printmaker. Everyone knew him. If you were in New York and you were an artist and you wanted to make a print, you're working with Robert Blackburn. Robert Blackburn himself was also an incredible printmaker, primarily lithography, but also woodcut and a number of other different media. But there's not a lot written. There are some. There aren't really robust bodies of research yet on Robert Blackburn, his own work. He's often tied to other more well-known artists. And this is one of the strengths of the Cochran collection of African American art. I think in my mind is that there are many artists who were prolific and whose work hasn't gotten the attention from scholars that it should have to date. And I think that that's one of the things that, institutions hope to rectify, right? Alongside the Billups Hatch Archive at Rose, and then with our partners at the AUC, the archives there. I think that there can be really, really robust and kind of fulsome explorations of works by these artists, and that is work yet to be done. It's exciting, nonetheless. Robert Blackburn is one of these artists, and I think Mildred would qualify as one. Recently, there has been more work published on Mildred, but there's still so much left to be done, and her legacy house in Grant Park is now open to artists and to scholars, and that is yet another resource here in the city for our students, for our future scholars, for artists who are looking to engage with another artist's work. And Camille is another. Camille's work, as she was promoting other artists, you and Missy collected a lot of her work, but that wasn't necessarily the case for other collectors who came through, other institutions who came through. She was very much about promoting the work of those around her, right? Less so promoting her own work. So how did she conceive of her own work, right? This is, again, work that is yet to be done. And these three artists in particular, form such a backbone in your collection. And I think, like Robert Blackburn said, this is not duplicated anywhere, at least not with specifically paper with prints in this media.
The problem with Bob, he was not a self-promoter. You could talk to Bob all day and night about the printmaking workshop. He was married to the workshop. If you start talking about him, that's not good. He's not interested in you talking about him. We probably had some 45 or so pieces we had collected of Bob's work, which was not easy because he was difficult. He was not interested in you showcasing him. He sacrificed his entire career for other artists. And this gentleman, Bob Blackburn, is a historical figure in a lot of different ways, but one would be like these artists of Jasper Johns and Rauschenberg. The first time they ever encountered a lithography stone, was with Bob. He was the master printer at this one particular place. So we decided we wanted to work around that, but it's really worked out beautifully. We created a collection of Will Barnett and Bob Blackburn. Will Barnett is another giant in the New York world of a printmaker and a painter. We became very close friends with Will. Bob told us one day, we were there, and he said, look, let's walk over and you can visit my friend, Will Barnett. And I'm going, wow, that'd be nice. And of course, we went in totally unannounced. And Bob was like that. He really enjoyed putting people together. But Will, I'm sure, we didn't look at any art at his studio or anything. But when I got back home, I wrote Mr. Barnett a note thanking him for his time, and I sent him our catalog of our 20th century show with all the white artists. And he wrote me back and said, next time you come to New York, you come by here. He said, I know every artist in your collection personally. Will Barnett taught at the Art Students League for forever, starting in the 30s. So he influenced a generation or two of artists we know about through his teaching. He's a great teacher. And anyway, Will was Bob's mentor. Bob's a few years, 9 years younger than Will Barnett. But anyway, they were both fantastic printmakers and were doing a lot of experimentation in those early days. So they're, to me, the history of Will Barnett and Bob Blackburn, they really created this print phenomenon we have in this country, because we didn't have much of that before 1930 in this country. There were a lot of Germans fleeing Nazi in Germany coming over here in the 30s, and a lot of them went right to the Art Students League to teach and work or whatever. And anyway, they have that strong tradition of printmaking in that part of the world, but they were very secretive. They would not pass on any of the secrets of printmaking. They did give some information to Will. I think Bob asked one of them one time, and the guy said, yeah, if you pay me $100 a week, I'll give it to you. That'd be like $100,000. But they did give information to Will, I think, and then Will recognized how brilliant and talented Bob was, and he passed it all on to Bob. So they were friends for over 60 years, Will Barnett and Bob Blackburn. So that was a whole nother history.
Yeah, and it's a good one to bring up. I think when you're looking at the images on the screen, you see these acronyms, TP, AP. You find these a lot in the Cochrane collection. These are, TP is trial proof, often an impression that doesn't exist in any other, doesn't exist at all. So not part of the edition, a trial. This print on the left actually ends up color lithograph. And on the right, artist proof. This is often when an artist is kind of messing around with things, hasn't figured out exactly what they want to stick with yet as far as the final design. And so you see a lot of these, though, I think, in the Cochrane collection. And so you get that process, right? In many cases, you see a print that is a trial, and you can kind of see an artist working the beginning of their career towards, something that maybe isn't yet realized. And I think you see this in Blackburn's work. I think you can see it very clearly in the Cochrane collection. And what Wes is saying about artists kind of withholding their secrets, that's true. And it's interesting for me. My background is in early modern European prints, my early background. And so the print shop is really where all of these mysteries are revealed and where all this exploration is taking place. And it speaks again to access and how you're getting your work out there. How is your name getting out there? How are you building a business? How are you building an audience? And that's something that the kind of early modern German printmakers, Albrecht Dürer, of course, and then you go a little further down and get your Dutch Rembrandt. But they're all doing this. They're all kind of it's a one man store, right? They're making the plates, they're printing them, they're doing multiple kind of originals, Rembrandt especially. And I think that tradition really does carry over. And I think Blackburn particularly and Will Barnett, they're in this exploration phase of trying to figure out lithography. And lithography, is not that new. But Blackburn's techniques with color and how he manipulated the stone, this is all new, and it's all by his design. And his techniques are pretty, I would say sort of ubiquitous now throughout. But again, not a self-promoter. right?
No.
Just not a self-promoter.
No, he wouldn't do that. So we had a hard time getting things from him.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you
Well, when
made
he
that
realized
happen.
Will was going to be on the program, that helped. But Bob's very close to Camille. So Camille would get the prints from Bob. And there's another ally we haven't mentioned in New York. Her name is Corinne Jennings, that runs this beautiful space in the East Village. And so Corinne was very close to Bob. She would get prints. So we would buy them from Corinne and Camille, not from Bob. But Bob would get the money. So he had to do it indirectly. Bob was known as Captain Chaos was his name. And so he created havoc and chaos everywhere. But God, what a beautiful man. He won the MacArthur Lifetime Achievement Award before he died. And he put every bit of that money right back into the workshop. He didn't take a dime, I'm almost positive. So anyway, he was just this, I don't know how to describe it. He's the most unassuming, modest guy you'd ever see. But if he were to walk through that door, you would feel the presence. He had a presence. I don't know how to describe it. It was fantastic. Born in Harlem, grew up in Harlem, and went to the very famous high school there. It's DeWitt High School. James Baldwin was his classmate. All these famous people came out of that particular high school. So anyway, it was fantastic to get to know Bob.
I was in the exhibition earlier. It's a phenomenal show, and just about knocked over to see a Faith Ringgold. If you could tell any story about Faith Ringgold, I would be thrilled.
I know I've met her several times through Camille. Her and Camille Billups were very close. And I'm sure we met her at the Loft. I know she must have been a character. We have a dear friend named Curly Holton, who's another protege of Bob Blackburn. He started another print shop in Pennsylvania is where he is now, but Curly has done a lot of prints with Faith Ringgold. They're very close. And so, gosh, I wish I had met her or got to be around her a little more, but I did not.
There is a picture in this binder full of photos of the artists that Faith Ringgold's in a few with Camille. So if they let me borrow it, I'll scan them all and we'll have them all.
You're welcome to. Yeah.
While we're waiting for another question, we haven't talked a lot about the exhibition that's downstairs, so I just wanted to quickly mention it if you haven't had a chance to go see it. It's called Together, Selections from the Cochrane Collection of African American Art. I curated, and my co-curator is Alexandra Nelson, who could not be here with us tonight. She is a Spelman undergraduate, extraordinary student, living her best life in Switzerland as an intern in a gallery there. But I mean, what a task! You're presented with. Well, see if you can give these over 500 works some sort of through line, something that is thematically tight. And it's just, that's an impossible ask. And so we kind of went by decade, and you see the back wall is hung salon style, and it features works by the women who I think really are such a crux of the collection. So it's got two by Mildred, two by Camille Billups, and you see Emma Amos there, and Howardina Pindell, and Valerie Maynard, Elizabeth Catlett. And I think just as the title suggests, Wes and Missy, created this collection along with Camille, who's such an influence for them, Mildred, who is such an influence, and Bob Blackburn too. And so the title is meant to reflect that, and it's meant to reflect their collecting strategy, always working and traveling shows together. But it's really about the community that helped this collection, that guided you as you collected. So that I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that show. That was a little bit longer than just a second. Sorry.
It's an honor to be here. I am a native of LaGrange and still a resident. And kind of a fan of Wes and Missy. I met Wes. I was saying today that today was the first time I met Missy in person. But I met Wes years ago when I, as a past volunteer of National Black Arts Festival, saw that there was going to be a display, an exhibit, National Black Arts Festival in LaGrange, Georgia. So I'm like, I got to go see this. So that was my introduction to Wes Cochran and his Cochran collection. And it's been an honor, Wes. I'm so proud of you and Missy and all the work you do. I'm so sad that we weren't able to get your collection to stay in LaGrange, but I am so proud that it will be shared as it was meant to be. So thank you all for all the hard work you've done. Thank you on behalf of LaGrange, Georgia. And thank you, Emory. I'm proud. I'm here with my sister. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. It's only an hour and a half from my door to here. Not so far. But yeah, that word together, that was a really appropriate name for, I think. And of course, we've worked together with Emory for the last year and a half, trying to orchestrate this to come here. So yeah, that's a great name, I think. And it was all about working together with, especially the artists in New York and all around Philadelphia, Chicago. So yeah, it's all about I don't know, it was almost like family, the way it worked for us. We were so fortunate. We miss a lot of these folks. They've joined their ancestors now. They're not with us, but wow, we had quite a journey.
First of all, congratulations. My name is Tina Dunkley, and I happen to be one of the living artists in that collection, and that I'm very honored to be in. And I know that Missy and Wes have been really working with this collection over several decades, really trying to get it situated. So this is really quite a great place for it to be. I wanted to also add the other thing that Missy and Wes are about, because they have a spot. I don't know if I'm supposed to tell this, but I'm telling it because
go right ahead.
It's been a real oasis for me in moments when I really needed to focus and think about what I'm going to do in my work. And this beautiful stone house that they've created for artists, writers to come and decompress. So. Yeah, they're very serious about their commitment to the arts and artists. So thank you again, and congratulations.
Thank you, Tina. I hope you'll come back whenever you can. Tina's been to the Butterfly several times, I think, through the years.
The Butterfly House is what... Yes. Oh, and we should say that Tina Dunkley's amazing drawing of Wes and Missy, we're very grateful for your permission to use it. It was one of the promotional images to advertise this program, and it's an amazing drawing. So thank you for that.
This is so outstanding, and I also love the connections with the Phillips Hat collection in the Rose Library. But I want to know a little bit more about what the Carlos Museum is going to do with this collection, how it also is going to fulfill the mission that Wes and Missy have been so committed to, in making these materials accessible to people from, all over.
That's a great question. This is Romare McKenzie, former director of the Rose Library, and I appreciate that question. When we first started talking about this, Clint Fluker, who's the former curator of African American Archives and now director of community engagement between libraries and museum, we had a pretty solid 3 to 5 year plan for this sort of pitch that we were giving them. Big part of that is continuing this legacy of sharing the work and making the work accessible. And so we'll work towards that. But I think it will be in partnership with both Wes and Missy, with Rose, with the AUC, with colleagues around the town, potentially around Atlanta and around the South, because keeping it stored away is not the life of this collection. It never has been. So we're not gonna do that. I can send you the cliff notes of that 3 to 5 year plan. Which will continue, working with the new African American Archives curator at Rose, will continue to develop and flesh it out. But it is a commitment, and it's an awesome one.